attendees, and welcome back. I hope that we'll be able to see some of the same dynamicism in the set of talks that we saw, that we're going to about to see, as we saw in the SF Jazz. There was a lot of sort of hitches and glitches along the way that I think are representative of the kind of environment that we get to work in, sort of the research environment. You're pushing boundaries, you're trying out some new things. Some of it goes smoothly, some of it doesn't always go smoothly. But what we do have is maybe some presentations about where some other boundaries are being pressed. How to get 100 gig, a successful application and receipt of funding to do that. Some security stuff later on, how to make Ethernet be efficient, and also how to construct science DMZs. So I think I'm really looking forward to the presentations. I think we've got some really interesting stuff to look at. Kicking it off is Valerie Polishar, and she's the manager of large data communication initiatives at UC San Diego. And her talents include moving encrypted and shared wireless, IPv6, and the 100 gig connectivity. She also serves as the liaison, which is actually a pretty important role, between the production infrastructure and the researchers. So please welcome Valerie.
All right, we'll see if I can master the technology of this microphone by talking loudly. Am I audible? Okay. So we're going to talk about money, which is less interesting than networking, but unfortunately necessary for networking. And my goal today is to help you learn from my successes and failures so you have a better chance of success with your own proposal. My track record over the years is that I have had 3 successful proposals to various agencies and 2 failed proposals, so I don't know if that, it's slightly better than nothing. But more interestingly, the last 2 CC NIE proposals, we had a failure and then a success, so we'll talk about that. So just to give you some context, back in 2000, UCSD initiated a plan to consider network connectivity as if it were a utility. So we were billing people kind of by the head rather than asking them how many IP addresses they had. This was very revolutionary at the time. We had to use direct funds because there weren't enough indirect funds. But anyway, we got a good model going, and this model will build you a very nice network. It builds you a very nice network that serves 95 to 98% of your customers. But it doesn't work when you have people who have special needs, so needs that go far beyond the average. And you really can't tax everyone for the needs of a few. In fact, federal agencies look at you askance if you try to tax everyone who's being funded with grant money for the needs of a few. And we do have a number of these people at UCSD. So what could we do about that? NSF is offering money for those special people, so this is very exciting. We have a solution to this problem. We're going to build ourselves a 100 gig freeway. So I've now completely abused the utility analogy, but we felt that we needed 100 gig to the campus to help support some of these researchers. And we know how to build networks, right? We understand what's physically involved in plugging in 100 gig. How do you build a proposal? This is something that most technical folks don't have to do a lot of the time. And so we read the proposal, which you should do. It's a lot of detail. And we figured out that you needed to not just have your infrastructure group, but you needed to find a faculty partner. So on the one hand, we had our technical group, which was administrative computing and telecommunications. We run the campus production network, the data communications infrastructure, and our internet gateway. And we partnered up with San Diego Supercomputer Center, specifically with Mike Norman, the head of the Supercomputer Center, who's a researcher there. They conduct a lot of big data analysis. They have a lot of the researchers that qualify as our special high needs folks. And they also support a number of specialized research network connections. So then we looked at the NSF proposal, and NSF proposals always ask you for 2 things. The first thing is intellectual merit. And that means this proposal has to help us advance scientific knowledge. You need some kind of science behind it. You can't just say, well, I want a bigger network. So that means you need to find the researchers who are actually going to use this new technology, figure out how they're going to use it to do science. The other critical thing that NSF asks you for is some broader impacts. By this, they mean some positive impact on society. And there's a long list of possibilities. The ones I've listed in this slide are ones that are maybe more likely to apply to network projects. The last one being very interesting because it's infrastructure for research and education. That's obviously what a network is. So you want to talk about how it can not just improve the research that you talk about in your proposal, but other education and research opportunities either at your university or at other universities. There are other options here. If you have projects that are going to engage the public, get them interested in science, provide education to the public, outreach. You might have some partnerships with industry. Those also qualify as broader impacts, but you have to include some of these in your proposal. And then there's sort of the obvious. You need to address the goals of the proposal, that particular solicitation. So you need to solve the problem that they are interested in. And that's actually key. You need to solve the problem they are interested in, not the problem that you are interested in. Hopefully there's a lot of overlap. And you need to address all the, I'm going to say the buzzwords that you spot in that solicitation. You want to try to work them in, talk about how you are going to address them, because those are the issues that are important to the program manager. So in the particular case of the CC NIE proposals, which a lot of people in this room have applied for, there was a list that included IPv6, perf sonar, and you wanted to walk through those and make sure that if at all possible, you found a way to address those. So here's some of the nicer quotes from the comments on the reviews from our first attempt. They felt that we definitely were providing an important capability for research. They thought we were taking good advantage of the infrastructure we already had. When they say touched all the bases, they're talking about that list of IPv6 and perf sonar and so on. We hit all of those. They thought that our timetable was sort of reasonable. It looked like we could do the work. And they actually thought it would be a great investment. But we made a couple of mistakes. And our first mistake was to start with our budget, which normally this is a reasonable thing to do. You say, I need to solve this problem. What do I need to do to solve it? How much will that cost? And then you see, can I find enough money for it? And that's typically what you're going to do when you're going to your campus administration to ask for money. But when you're going to the NSF to ask for money, you need to kind of go the other way. You need to look at what the grant is there to do, look at the amount of money that's available, and then try to come up with a project that fits in those parameters that also accomplishes your goals. So it's a kind of a backwards approach. And the other mistake that we made was very simple. We didn't read the fine print. So, and this is embarrassing, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. So I said that you needed to see what the grant was intended for. And this solicitation had two sections. One was called Data-Driven Networking Infrastructure for the Campus and Researcher, and that offered up to $500,000. And then there was another one called Network Integration and Applied Innovation, and that offered $1 million. And we read some of it, but we missed kind of the key distinctions between these two sections. And we thought, well, we have $1 million project, right? We added up our costs, it's $1 million, so it's got to be in that second category. So here are some of the negative comments that we got. And you'll notice that some key words here are innovation, novel. We lacked those things, so we were rejected. And what we did wrong was summed up pretty well in this phrase: the proposal was not adequate in this solicitation area. We picked the wrong box. it turns out that the network integration and applied innovation was looking for you to actually develop something new, some software, some novel hardware, some new kinds of middleware or bridging technologies. That really was not the right category for building a 100 gig link, which is something that's, you know, it's relatively new, but we're doing it with purchased off-the-shelf equipment. So once we understood what we did wrong, we tried again. And this time we did pick the correct solicitation area. That meant we had a smaller budget. We went out and found science drivers again, faculty members that had interesting projects that were going to make use of this new connection. Again, we developed some measurable milestones. So we actually talked about on this date, we're going to try to transmit, you know, this number of bits at this speed. And we squeezed our hardware into the budget. It meant we had to change our architecture a little bit, leave some nice to have things out. And to do that, we used some local money to raise the base level of the campus. Now, something that many NSF solicitations will say is that you cannot share costs. So you can't say, look, this costs $500,000, but the campus is going to kick in $200,000 of that. That's not an acceptable way to do this. But something that we could do was to bring our infrastructure, fabric, and some of our switches up to a level that we kind of needed to do anyway, just general upgrading, and we could do that on our dime, getting us ready for this process. So we couldn't wrap in all the goodies that we might want to wrap in, but if there were goodies that we were going to do anyway, we could do those on our dime. So according to the comments, here are the things we did right. They liked our science drivers. They said our plan was solid and easy to follow. They liked the fact that our equipment was low risk. So now that we're in a category where they're not expecting innovation, the fact that we're buying stuff off the shelf that's already shipping is a good thing. We included a risk management plan. So we actually talked about what the concerns were with making changes to production infrastructure and how we were going to alert the campus and prepare to back out changes. And you know, it kind of seems silly to be writing all this up, but they liked it. Again, the specifics that we put in our milestones were valuable. Again, we made sure to check off all the boxes, IPv6, perf sonar, common. They liked the fact that we talked about how we were going to turn this into a production at the end of the funding period, because NSF does not like the idea of having their funding, you know, just sort of go to waste for a temporary trial project. We made sure that we clarified some broader impacts. I felt like this was a little bit of a weak point because we just sort of said, well, gee, there's these other 10 researchers that could probably also benefit that we didn't list, but that was satisfying to them. This particular area required a cyber infrastructure plan, and that was something they noted. But most of all, again, this is NSF. This is what they care about. They said science will benefit from this project. So that's the most important thing at the end of the day for them. And this project was approved. So this, again, is our attempt to bring 100 gig to the campus. It's not terribly complex. We're going to extend it into both the supercomputer areas and our science DMZ and our production network as 410, so not as 100 gig there. I have a tiny bit of time left, so I'll just briefly show you some of our science drivers, just because they're kind of cool. The CM map project that John Helly is the lead of at UCSD. These guys are trying to predict the effect of clouds on weather and climate, and they have to move massive quantities of data between various high-performing computing centers around the country to our Gordon supercomputer. And in December of 2012, John actually called me on the phone and said, I've got this huge disk of data, and I need to get it just up the state to, I think it was to NERSC, And what's the fastest way I can get that there? Is there a special connection that I can use? And I had to tell him it was FedEx. You know, that really was absolutely the fastest way to get that data moved. And it's going to be true for some time yet, but it's kind of embarrassing to have that be your answer. So he was a real good pusher for this update, because the amount of change in realized time to move this stuff around was impressive. The Polar Bear project, they have a radio telescope in the desert in Chile, and they're pumping data from that, about 3 terabytes a month. So it's not a huge amount of data. But then once it arrives at actually at NERSC as well, they need to do Monte Carlo simulations on this data, and it actually just multiplies the size of the data enormously. And then it gets passed down to San Diego Supercomputer Center. So over the life of the project, couple of years, they're going to want to move 10 petabytes, and they would like to be able to move it you know, right when they need it moved, so that some simulations can be done at both ends in real time. We're a tier 2 site for the LHC, so we have lots of data coming in, lots of data going out. We're a redistributor for all this data. They're going to spin up again the end of this year, and they're hoping to push even more data, so this will be a very useful connection for them. PRISM at UCSD is our equivalent of a science DMZ. It's kind of super highways of fast networking across the campus, and also a CC NIE funded project. And so they, in addition to getting their data across the campus at 80 gig, they would certainly love to be able to get it to other institutions quickly. So I'm running out of time here, so I'm just going to skip through this. This is our architecture. So you can see Supercomputer Center, our Science DMZ, and the production network. Those are the connections that we're going to feed out of that 100 gig. And I've kind of summarized on this last slide, which you can download this from the Scenic site if you want, kind of the recommendations that came out of our experience for getting your proposal funded. And I guess a minute for questions. Yeah.
So I read that CC NIE grant last year.
Uh-huh.
I also was kind of confused about the innovation part.
Yes.
Because I was sort of reading it that if somebody did something innovative on the network, that might...
That was kind of our interpretation. Yeah, so we thought if somebody did something innovative on the network, that would qualify. No, apparently not.
It actually had to be you guys implementing something or producing something.
Right. Right. So I guess for the purposes of the recording, I should repeat that the question is basically, you know, it looked, when you read the proposal, it kind of looked like if someone was doing something innovative on the network, that would qualify as innovation. But no, they really wanted the project itself to contain innovation. So they were looking for maybe new protocols for transferring data. They were looking for new middleware, maybe some software for the front end for the research, or something along those lines. Any other questions?
All right, well, thank you very much.